The very first move is not an outward tactic, it is an inward discipline. The instinct for most men when they feel ignored is reactive. They reach, they send another message, they scroll through past chats searching for clues, they dramatize the silence. What you must understand is that the discomfort you feel is not caused by her absence, it is caused by your attachment to a certain outcome and the story your mind writes in the vacuum. Detachment is not coldness, it is clarity. It is the capacity to notice your rising anxiety without becoming its servant. Think of a trader who panics at every tick of the market. He hemorrhages emotional capital and makes poor decisions. The composed investor, by contrast, understands volatility and waits for structure. Your emotional market just dipped, hold your position. Psychologically, what's happening inside you is a threat response. The social brain equates sudden loss of attention with potential rejection, and rejection with a diminishment of status or belonging. If you do not intervene, this primitive circuitry hijacks your higher reasoning and drives impulsive behaviors that signal insecurity. Interrupt the loop. Label the feeling agitation, impatience, ego bruised. The moment you name it, you create a small space between stimulus and response. In that space lies power. And philosophers from the Stoics to modern cognitive therapists converge on this truth: you cannot always govern externals, but you can always govern your interpretation. Detaching emotionally begins by reclaiming authorship of that interpretation. Instead of, she is ignoring me, therefore I'm not enough. Reframe, there is silence. Silence is neutral data. My value is not on trial. This reframing is not denial, it's accurate thinking. Perhaps she's busy. Perhaps her interest is fading. Perhaps she's testing boundaries. All are possibilities. None require you to abandon composure. Your calm presence is your signal of internal abundance. Neediness is the advertisement of internal scarcity, and people instinctively discount what is marketed with desperation. Now, notice the paradox. The more you attempt to force connection in this moment, the more you erode the very respect you want to preserve. Presence loses value when it insists on being purchased. Detachment restores that value by recentering you on your mission, your routines, your growth. This is not a performance to provoke a response. It is a genuine redirection of energy toward assets you control: your health, your skills, your network, your purpose. When your life remains without a reply, you shift from a bargaining posture to a sovereign posture. Sovereignty is attractive because it signals psychological safety. You are not a burden seeking validation. You are a grounded individual offering partnership from fullness. Philosophically, think of attachment as over-identification. Her attention is the oxygen of my self-worth. Detachment is the correction. My worth is intrinsic. Her attention, when present, is additive, not foundational. From this vantage point, you can choose a measured action later. Maybe a single clear message, maybe graceful silence, maybe a decision to move on. Without the fog of emotional urgency, calm is a strategic asset. It preserves optionality. It prevents reputational self-sabotage. It lets patterns reveal themselves over time so that you respond to reality, not to projections. So pause, breathe, observe, reinvest in yourself. Allow silent space to clarify intent, hers and yours. Emotional detachment here is not a withdrawal of humanity, it is the sharpening of it. Master that first move, and every subsequent decision becomes cleaner. Master that first move, and you stop negotiating your value in moments of uncertainty. Choose composure now, because a man who can remain still in the face of perceived neglect is a man who is hard to shake, and the world, including her, instinctively respects what it cannot easily unbalance. The moment you stop reacting and reclaim your internal balance, you must decide where to invest the liberated energy. Nature abhors a vacuum. If you do not fill the space her silence created with purposeful construction, your mind will fill it with rumination, fantasy, and insecurity. Attention is a currency. Waste it on decoding every gap in communication and you impoverish yourself. Invest it into your mission and you compound value. Mission is not an abstract slogan. It is the structured pursuit of becoming more competent, more resilient, more creatively valuable to the world. When you subordinate your emotional volatility to a clearly defined trajectory, your learning goals, your business plan, your physical conditioning, your craft, you transmute rejection, sensitive energy into productive momentum. Psychologically, this is classic cognitive reallocation. You interrupt maladaptive loops by supplying your brain with demanding, intrinsically rewarding tasks that generate measurable progress markers. Progress itself becomes a stabilizer. Each micro win signals to your nervous system, we are moving forward, reducing the perceived threat embedded in temporary relational uncertainty. Understand, attraction is largely a perception of value plus emotional safety. Value is not loud, it is evidenced through disciplined consistency. While many men chase intermittent validation, the man anchored in process produces an aura of inevitability. He is becoming more regardless of immediate approval. That inevitability reframes the relational dynamic. You are not auditioning for belonging, you are building an ecosystem and inviting only those who resonate with its standards. Philosophically, this is a shift from scarcity ontology, I must secure her attention to feel significant, to an abundance ontology, I generate significance by what I create, contribute, and refine daily. Under scarcity, silence feels like an existential verdict. Under abundance, silence is simply neutral space during which you advance the project of yourself. Most people overestimate what bursts of effort can do and underestimate what a rigorously protected daily architecture produces. Guard your mornings for high cognitive work, learning a marketable skill, writing, building a revenue engine. Use physical training not merely for aesthetics but as a laboratory for discipline and a regulator for mood. Exercise metabolizes stress hormones and sharpens executive function, which in turn reduces impulsive outreach. Curate your informational dieting, replace passive scrolling, which amplifies social comparison and perceived inadequacy, with deliberate study. Every hour reallocated from anxious checking to skill acquisition increases your opportunities, surfacing new networks, new leverage, new optionality. Optionality is strategic power. It dilutes the emotional weight of any single person's attention because your future is no longer a narrow corridor, but a branching landscape. There is also a subtle ethical dimension. When you focus on improvement, you avoid the manipulative theatrics some adopt, performative indifference, artificial delays. You are not finding business, you are genuinely occupied creating asymmetric value. Authentic absorption radiates differently than contrived aloftness. People sense when your silence is full of construction rather than petty retaliation. One invites curiosity and respect, the other breeds games and distrust. Moreover, as you elevate your calibration improves, you differentiate between someone who truly complements your trajectory and someone whose interest was conditional on you being perpetually available. Self-improvement is thus both magnet and filter. Link this back to the first move. Emotional detachment created the clearing. Mission-driven focus plants in that cleared soil. Later, when you evaluate her behavior, the analytical point, or enforce boundaries, you will do it from surplus, not bitterness. Your voice will be calm because your identity is not dangling on her reply. That sovereignty cannot be performed at the last second. It must be built through thousands of quiet, unglamorous repetitions. So channel the silence into structure, build relentlessly, and let your evolving competence answer questions your words never could. Because a man absorbed in purposeful growth becomes harder to ignore, not by chasing attention, but by outgrowing the need for it. Scarcity is not a gimmick, it is a truthful alignment of your availability with your actual value. After you have stabilized your emotions and rest centered on your mission, the next temptation is subtle to just check in, to engineer accidental encounters, to send a clever line meant to recapture momentum. That impulse is the residual echo of insecurity wanting immediate relief. Chasing is the behavioral leakage of internal doubt. The very act of repeatedly reaching communicates a hierarchy. You are placing her attention above your standards, above your schedule, above your stated priorities. People intuit hierarchies instantly. When you signal that her minimal investment can extract your maximal response, you invert value perception. What is continuously present becomes perceptually discounted. This is not cynicism, it is an observable psychological principle. Novelty and scarcity heighten salience, excess supply dulls it. Creating scarcity does not mean orchestrating artificial distance, timing replies with a stopwatch, or performing indifference. Manipulation leaks through micro-signals, the over-curated pause, the conspicuous online activity elsewhere, the passive-aggressive meme. Genuine scarcity emerges when your time is legitimately absorbed by growth, contribution, and disciplined rest. Your calendar, if honestly constructed, will not permit compulsive monitoring. The silence you offer is not a weapon, it is the natural byproduct of a life with momentum. Philosophically, this is the move from reactive dependence to autonomous stewardship of attention. Freedom over your focus is sovereignty. Surrendering it for intermittent pings is a quiet form of self-abdication. Understand that desire often intensifies in the space created by unanswered certainty. When you do not chase, you allow an authentic question to surface on her side. Where is his energy directed? Why is he not orbiting me like others do? That question can only arise if there is actual space. If you fill every gap with pursuit, you preempt curiosity and convert potential into boredom. Curiosity is the bridge to re-engagement, boredom is the exit ramp. Curiosity cannot thrive under saturation. There is also a diagnostic utility embedded in scarcity. Pulling back grants you data. If she re-engages with warmth and continuity, interest still breathes. If she remains indifferent, you gain clarity with having spent weeks in self-eroding pursuit. Scarcity applied correctly accelerates truth. Chasing delays it, wrapping you in narratives. Maybe she didn't see it. Maybe she's testing me. Maybe one more message. Each unreciprocated attempt devalues your internal currency. You pay escalating emotional fees for diminishing informational returns. Emotionally, resisting the chase rewires your reward system. Instead of dopamine spikes from intermittent digital interaction, you begin to anchor satisfaction in tangible progress markers. Projects advanced, workouts completed, skills sharpened. This shift stabilizes mood and decreases impulsive outreach because you are no longer starving yourself of meaningful reinforcement. You become harder to unbalance precisely because your center of gravity has diversified beyond a single relational outcome. Do not mistake composure for passivity. If later you choose to send a succinct, respectful message, you will do so without subtextual pleading. One clear communication, then space. That posture communicates I am available to those who reciprocate. I am unavailable to dynamics that drain. Scarcity protects self-respect while offering a clean invitation. Anything more collapses into pursuit theater, and theater corrodes authenticity. Link this with what follows. You cannot effectively analyze her intentions or enforce boundaries if you have already flouted the channel with overinvestment. Strategic restraint now preserves credibility later. When you finally decide, continue, calibrate, or walk away. Your choice will register as grounded, not reactive. So withdraw the chase, let silence perform its honest audit, and let your disciplined absence amplify the quiet signal of your worth. Because a man who refuses to beg for attention compels the world to recalibrate how it must engage with him. Not every instance of silence is a sign of disrespect or disinterest, and understanding this distinction is critical. Too many men misinterpret a pause in communication as a personal attack or a definitive rejection. But reality is often more layered. People have complex lives, conflicting priorities, and personal battles they rarely voice. She might be dealing with stress, focusing on her own growth, or simply needing space. If you immediately assume the worst, you not only misread the situation, but also sabotage your own ability to respond with clarity and strength. A man who rushes to judgment projects insecurity. A man who observes and analyzes projects confidence and self-mastery. This is where patience and discernment become tools of power. Instead of reacting impulsively, step back and ask yourself the right questions. Has her behavior shifted gradually, or is this a momentary pause? Is this a pattern of neglect or an isolated occurrence? Is she communicating interest through other channels, body language, tone, or previous effort, or is this silence part of a larger withdrawal? These questions help you separate noise from signal. It's a mistake to assume that ignoring is always deliberate or malicious. Sometimes it's situational, and those who can read context accurately maintain their dignity while avoiding unnecessary emotional drama. Philosophically, think of this as an exercise in emotional intelligence, the ability to read between the lines, to interpret both what is said and what is unsaid. Emotional intelligence is not about overanalyzing, it's about noticing patterns without attaching to every fluctuation. When you step into this analytical frame, you stop being a reactive participant and start being an observer of dynamics. This shift is liberating because it prevents you from over-investing in a situation that may not warrant your energy. If her silence is intentional and part of a pattern of disrespect, clarity comes quickly. If it's unintentional and your composure earns respect rather than erodes it. But here's the harsh truth: sometimes silence is communication. Sometimes ignoring you is her way of signaling that her interest has faded or that you've been placed too low on her priority list. This is not something to fight against, because value is never proven through begging or over-explaining. If you sense that her actions consistently reveal disinterest, take it as data rather than as a blow to your ego. Too many men chase clarity from the wrong source, hoping for explanations, when the truth is already visible in behavior. Actions always speak louder than words, and silence, when consistent, is often the loudest action of all. In these moments, the strongest response is to respect what is shown and adjust accordingly. Do not waste time crafting clever responses or seeking validation from someone who cannot even offer you basic communication. Your time and energy are precious resources, and the more you learn to protect them, the less tolerance you will have for dynamics that feel one-sided. There is a quiet strength in recognizing when a situation no longer deserves your attention and choosing to redirect your energy toward people and goals that truly align with your values. When you approach situations this way, you send a silent but powerful message. I know my worth, and I will not compete for what is freely available elsewhere. This mindset not only protects your self-respect, but also shifts the dynamic in your favor. People often come back when they realize you won't chase them endlessly. And if they don't, you've saved yourself time that can be invested in your mission, your growth, and the people who actually value your presence. So, learn to read the silence without fear. Let her behavior reveal her intentions. Because the man who is unafraid to walk away from confusion is the man who ultimately commands both clarity and respect. Standards are the architecture that protects everything you are building. Boundaries are the operational system that enforces that architecture in real time. Without them, the emotional detachment you practiced, the mission focus you cultivated, the strategic scarcity you established, and the analytical clarity you applied all begin to leak. Men often confuse boundaries with ultimatums or manipulative tests. A boundary is not a threat. It is a statement of self-governancing. This is how I manage my energy, time, and emotional bandwidth. When a woman repeatedly ignores, breadcrumbs, or oscillates between warmth and coldness without explanation, you are not obligated to remain on that roller coaster. You are obligated to maintain internal order. Philosophy calls this integrity, alignment between declared values and enacted behavior. Every time you tolerate patterns that you internally know erode your equilibrium, you fracture integrity and teach sight that your standards are negotiable under pressure. That erodes self-trust, and once self-trust declines, neediness slips back in because you no longer feel anchored from within. Raising standards begins with quietly auditing your current tolerance thresholds. What behaviors trigger disproportionate mental occupation afterwards? How many unanswered messages before you shift focus? How often do you accept last-minute cancellations framed as casual? You cannot enforce what you have never defined. Clarity precedes enforcement. Write, or at least mentally codify. Principless, I respond to reciprocity, not intermittent crumbs. I communicate once with clarity. If energy is not matched, I redirect. I do not compete for presence with someone who is ambivalent. These are not slogans, they are operational guardrails. The mind under emotional stress reverts to impulse. Guardrails reduce the cost of decision, making by pre-deciding lines you will not cross. Now understand the psychological elegance of a simple, non-reactive boundary communication. You do not accuse or guilt trip. You mirror reality and declare your standard. I value straightforward, consistent communication. If that's not where you're at, that's perfectly fine. I'm going to invest my time elsewhere. Calm, concise, complete. You do not follow it with a cascade of justifications, because over-explaining dilutes authority and invites debate. Silence after a clear boundary is a strategic amplifier. It forces the other person to either rise to the structure or opt out. Both outcomes are wins, alignment, or clarity. There will be resistance inside you the first few times you execute this, a subtle fear of losing potential connection. Recognize that fear as attachment inertia, not as evidence you are making the wrong move. Long-term, enforcing standards filters out low-effort dynamics early, preserving cognitive and emotional resources for relationships that can compound. Think in terms of opportunity cost. Every week entangled in ambiguity is a week not leveraged for depth with someone aligned or for forward motion in your mission. Boundaries accelerate sorting. And sorting is strategy. You minimize sunk emotional costs and avoid building elaborate narratives around inconsistent signals. Philosophically, a boundary is an act of self-respect that simultaneously respects the autonomy of the other. You are not cursing her to comply, you are informing her how engagement with you functions. This preserves dignity on both sides. If she adjusts and engages with greater intentionality, you now interact from elevated baselines. If she drifts further, you have empirical confirmation to disengage without resentment. Resentment largely arises when people expect standards they never explicitly set. Articulate, then act. No drama, no sarcasm, no passive jabs, just a clean pivot. Link this to what comes next, the decision to walk away, when necessary, lands with far more gravity when it is the natural extension of pre-established standards rather than an impulsive reaction after a spiral. Each prior point prepared you for this enforcement phase. Now enforcement stabilizes all prior gains. So define, state, and uphold. Because a man whose standards are non-negotiable quietly teaches the world how to treat him, and the world listens. Walking away is not an act of dramatized revenge. It is the rational culmination of everything you have already practiced. Emotional detachment, mission focus, strategic scarcity, analytical discernment, and enforced standards. When you reach this juncture, you are not slamming a door. You are simply ceasing to hold it open for someone who refuses to walk through with equal intention. Most men treat walking away as a last desperate bluff, a performance designed to provoke pursuit. That is still chasing, just inverted. The authentic walk away contains no theatrical flourish. It is quiet, clean, internally validated. You are not trying to trigger guilt, fear of loss, or curiosity. You are reclaiming bandwidth and reallocating it to arenas that compounding your craft, your health, your network, and relationships that reciprocate without emotional gymnastics. Psychologically, the ability to walk away resets your internal reward system to sovereignty. You teach your nervous system that closeness is chosen, not clung to. You dismantle the scarcity narrative that says, if I release this connection, I may never experience something similar. Scarcity thinking chains you to substandard dynamics. Abundance thinking recognizes optionality. The reality that competence plus character plus consistent growth inevitably generate new, higher quality connections. The paradox is that genuine willingness to leave often elevates how others engage with you. Precisely because you radiate that you are not negotiating your worth. But you must never adopt willingness to leave merely to engineer that response. Instrumentalizing detachment corrupts it and leaks as inauthenticity. Philosophically, walking away honors a fundamental principle: value flows where it is appreciated and multiplies where it is reciprocated. Remaining in one-sided ambiguity is a misallocation problem, not a loyalty virtue. Your time is a finite asset with a compounding curve. Misallocated hours now have opportunity costs that extend years forward. Each cycle of rumination is a tiny tax on cognitive bandwidth. Enough taxes and strategic thinking erodes. Walking away is a rebalancing, a portfolio shift from depreciating emotional assets to growth vehicles. Understand the difference between persistence and attachment. Persistence is pursuing a worthy, mutual objective in the face of healthy obstacles. Attachment is clinging to an unbalanced dynamic in the face of clear misalignment. Persistence builds resilience, attachment dilutes identity. When patterns of inconsistency, neglect, or low-effort breadcrumbs remain after one clear boundary communication, data has spoken. At that point, staying is not loyalty, it is self-abandonment dressed up as patience. Mechanically, walking away is simple. You stop initiating, you stop monitoring, you dismantle the micron rituals that kept your mind orbiting her, checking last seen, rereading threads, constructing speculative narratives. You inject those reclaim cycles into structured progression. You do not announce departures with grand statements. You already stated your standard earlier. Now you let silence do logistical work. If she reappears later with genuine alignment and consistent action, you evaluate from your upgraded baseline, not from nostalgic hunger. Upgrades change eligibility criteria. If she does not reappear, reality simply confirmed what you suspected. Proof you made the correct allocation decision. Emotionally, expect a withdrawal echo. The mind craves the intermittent reinforcement pattern it was conditioned to chase. Counter it by amplifying tangible winces. Finish a demanding workout. Ship a piece of creative output, advance a monetizable skill, deepen a high-quality friendship. Stack objective markers of movement so your brain associates the walk away with expansion, not loss. Loss frames generate regret loops. Expansion frames generate momentum. And remember, walking away is not about making someone chase you. It is about refusing to chase what refuses to meet you. If another chooses to pursue after witnessing your grounded exit, that is their independent recalibration, not your engineered outcome. You simply held your line long enough for truth to surface. So release cleanly, redirect fiercely, and let the space you create become proof that you are a builder of value, not a beggar of attention. Because the man who can let go without bitterness is the man who cannot be held hostage by anyone's silence.